Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Tara Kay. I'm the Campus and Faculty Development Specialist. What I've done is I've put you all on mute, but every time you want to ask a question, all you have to do is click on the mute button and unmute yourself so you can ask a question during the training. So today we're going to look at how you can use reports to understand department or program performance. And I'm going to begin with a very short overview of what we recommend in terms of putting the reports into context and looking at longitudinal views. Then I'm going to go into faculty reports, response rate reports, question mean analysis, and I'm going to try and spend the majority of the time on the unit summary report because that's really the section where you can get a lot of meaningful data from there. And then I'm going to end with aggregate data file. So a quick overview of what we mean by context is, I like to use this image because if I were to show you this speedometer and ask you, is this a speed that's too fast or too slow? You would probably say, well, it depends. It depends on the person driving on the freeway or if the person is driving on a school zone. And that's how we also like to recommend that you look at your report. The report that you see from your faculty should be viewed in context. So for example, what kind of course were they? Were they given the course last minute because another instructor wasn't able to teach it? Was it a brand new course? And the meaning that you can take away from the reports is to interpret the results in context and compare them to previous terms and then have them reflect, and that's where the word diagnostic comes from, self-diagnose, reflect, and discuss amongst themselves or in a department meeting. Also, don't forget that this instrument also allows faculty to try new ideas. For example, whenever they're interested in using a new teaching method and see how their students respond, they can always use this diagnostic tool, teaching essentials tool, to get data around that. Which brings me to the importance of always looking at reports longitudinally. So if they're teaching the same class every term, they can always track their reports, looking at the data and the comments, and practicing reflectively in terms of using reflective practice and tweaking their courses and seeing whether the data changes over time. And even if they're not teaching the same course, it's also interesting to see how the teaching methods and data might change over time if they're experimenting. So the implications of the longitudinal review and the reflective practice and this whole closing the loop is that basically on the one hand, it's just good practice. And it also happens to be what every accrediting body is looking for, because they, as well as you probably know, that when you practice reflective practice and you also, when faculty use reflective practice methods and also try to close the loop in terms of improving diagnostic, it has shown to improve teaching and learning over a period of time. So that's just an overview of what we like departments to use when it comes to looking at the reports and how they should use them. So access to department head reports, how do you access it? It's the same URL that you'll be getting from Brian. It's he'll generate a link for you and he can send you that link. Once you have that link, once you click on it, you'll get a sample credentials login page that you see here. Obviously your campus logo would appear there. You would use the same campus credentials that you currently use for any other thing that you're using. And you'll be able to go in and check how the faculty reports, just go to the next page. When you go in, you'll be able to see the faculty reports, the question mean analysis, response rates, and unit summary reports. So I'm going to go into each of these in a minute. Basically, what you should know, and I'm going to change screens so I can use the live sandbox here, is that depending on the access and the role permission that you're given, that's the data that you're going to have access to. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to begin with the faculty reports. And this is an area where on the left, you'll be able to see the permission level. In this case, I have permission to look at the School of Business as a dean, but also have access to two departments, the accounting and the economics department or program or whatever we happen to call it on campus. Also, if you click on the plus sign here, you'll be able to see the section of the organizational unit chart that has been allocated to your access level. On the top, you'll be able to filter the reports depending on the instrument that the faculty are using. So if you only want to see the faculty who are using the Learning Essentials, you would filter by that, or Teaching Essentials. And you'll also be able to see previous terms if they're available. So once you go in, you'll have a list of all your faculty. On the right, you've noticed you have a hyperlink that says course reports and summary reports. I'm going to show you what summary reports, the access you have here. Basically, this is just an electronic version of the PDF that the faculty get when they receive an email that their reports are ready to go, and they have 2 attachments with that are in PDF format, and that's just basically a PDF format of these 2 reports, a quantitative report and a qualitative report. And this has just a list of all the questions that are asked of the students. So teaching methods, if they're using the diagnostic form, learning objectives, if they're using the Learning Essentials or diagnostic form. And you'll notice it has different colors. And these are the different sections. So the key is up here. And this faculty, obviously it's a little too much, but it's just my sandbox, happens to be teaching all these courses and sections for this particular term. So it's just for you to see that when they click on the quantitative, they will get a report of all the sections and all the courses that they're teaching for that particular term, and you have access to the same information. So on the right, you'll see they have how many students are enrolled and how many responded, but also each line item, each item or question for each section that they're teaching has the mean score for that question, the standard deviation, how many responded, and the distribution of the responses for those particular answers. And if I scroll down, all the way down, that's where the custom questions that were created would appear as well. So this is the summary report for quantitative. For qualitative summary report is the same concept, all the courses that the faculty are teaching for that particular term. And these are just the comments of the students for each of those classes. So this is a quick overview for the summary report. You also have access to every one of your faculty within your unit, and you have access to their course reports. So if you click on the course report, you will see exactly what the faculty would see. Again, all the courses that they're teaching that term, their response rates. And if you click on that course, you'll have the same view as the faculty, which is how many students responded, response rates, the 5 tabs, the course characteristic questions at the bottom here that contribute to the adjusted scores, the progress on relevant objectives, what learning objectives they chose as either essential or important, and the relevant converted average comparisons. Now, what's I think interesting for you in this particular section of the report from a department head perspective, I think the most interesting one for professional development is if you want to go into an individual faculty report, the tab to use in terms of professional development is the formative tab, which really has the suggested actions. And what this section does is it takes the high level information and makes it meaningful for the faculty. And this is what you could always have open with your faculty if they have questions around you helping them go through the reports. So what this does is it generates a suggested action item, and it says those methods that were employed less frequently as reported by the students and compared to those teaching classes of similar size and level of student motivation, if those methods that were reported to be used less frequently, that's reported here as something that that the faculty could consider increasing use, and it has the average, the distribution, the relevant objectives that correlate to that particular teaching method. But also what's new here that we've never had prior to moving on to the campus platform is really what's at the heart of IDEA's mission as a nonprofit, which is to provide resources from our collaboration with teaching and learning experts in the field. So in this case, it happens to make a suggested action of a specific teaching method. And it happens to be, let's hope it loads. I'm wondering if it's my internet that's slow. Let me try again. Let me try another one. While that's loading, I'll just talk through and then it'll load, hopefully. It's basically the same professional organizational development network notes, or the pod notes that have been published in the past 34 years that we have, and it links them to the particular teaching method and style. So you can always have conversations with your faculty about recommendations that are made for those teaching methods. I think it's taking too long to load, so I'll try a few minutes later, but basically it shows up the publication. And if you're interested in terms of interpreting faculty reports, I shared with Brian a generic recording for faculty that we use. You can always, at your own time, click through the 1-hour training that we create for faculty on how to interpret their reports. And then what that does is also gives you some background on how you can have conversations with your faculty in terms of when you go into the course reports. So I'm going to stop there and see if you have any questions around faculty reports. And you can unmute yourself.
Tara, I was wondering if you could talk about that, when you clicked on the course reports there, that first screen that you see, this one here, are you planning to talk about that a little bit more, just as far as some of the key areas to pay attention to on this page, and what the different colors mean with the numbers?
Oh, sure, I can do that. I just didn't know how much you wanted me to go into in depth. So the summary here, the summary box, is basically the average that is calculated of these two numbers. So this is all that it means. The summary is an average number that takes this number and calculates an average, and it's called the summary average. The progress on relevant objective average, if I click on that, is an area where faculty will see where they chose their essential or important objectives, and it'll show the learning objective, the average score, which is out of on a scale of 1 to 5, and the average comparison. I'll talk about this in a minute when I go back to the main page, and the distribution. So of how many students that are enrolled, how many rated this scale of 4 to 5, the scale of 3, or 1 to 2. So this is just the percentage of student rating distribution and how they rated it. Now this box here is the ratings of summative questions. There's only actually one question in all the questions that are asked from the students about the teacher or the faculty, and it's right here. If I click on there, it asks them, how do you rate this instructor? I rate this instructor as an excellent teacher. I rate this instructor as this course as an excellent course. So this is the only area out of all the questions that are asked where the faculty member where the student is asked about the faculty member. All other questions in the diagnostic form are about either teaching methods or learning objectives, nothing about the instructor. And again, you'll always see, whatever page you go at, you will always be able to see the average and the converted average. And I'll talk about that when I go back to the main page. So that's these three boxes. So the summary, the progress on relevant objectives, and the ratings of summative question takes the average of those two questions, which is excellent teacher, excellent course, and it gives you that number. So on this page, you or the faculty will also have the ability to view the page in terms of either adjusted averages or raw averages. So what's the difference? You'll notice when I toggle between these two, the number changes. And we recommend for faculty or department heads, depending on how you decide at your campus, to all agree on looking at, if you're looking at data, to look at a single item. Either you all decide to look at the raw averages or the adjusted averages. So what's the difference between the two? One of the unique things about IDEA instruments is that we control for factors that are beyond the influence of the instructor. So the purpose of adjusting scores, the way you see here, is to level the playing field for faculty when comparisons are going to be made between instructors teaching different kinds of classes. So for instance, scores of instructors who are teaching large required general education classes, they can be compared much more authentically to those who are teaching smaller, high-level in-major classes. So this instrument, the adjusted average, adjusts the scores based on student background, preparation, work habits, motivation, and class size, which are all factors that are beyond the instructor's control. And those questions are right here at the bottom. This is how the students rate themselves on student background, preparation, work habits, motivation, and class size. I mean, well, the class size is obviously taken automatically from the class size of the enrollment numbers. So that's the difference between adjusted and raw scores. Any questions about these two items? So another thing to notice is what you notice here, which are the converted average comparisons. And when I mouse over it, you'll see boxes appear. So the converted average comparison is really a standardized score or a t-score. The system takes the average score and it converts it to a t-score so that what you can do with the results is to compare these results to other instructors and other groups as a way of interpretation. So this score compares, I'll give you an example. What this is doing here, just the progress on relevant objective. This score here, 39, when I mouse over it, it says lower 20%, 38 to 44 range, compares the course to the overall mean in the comparison group by telling you if your score is either similar, see if it was here, it would say similar, lower, or higher, or much higher, or much lower. It's basically a way of you or the faculty being able to place that particular item within a distribution scale when it's converted to a t-score or a standardized score. And because it's converted to a standardized score, it has a much more relevant or meaningful method of comparing between courses. And for example, here, let's see if it shows up. For me right now, I have making the comparison to either the IDEA database, which contains over 45,000 courses. So the comparison norm is around that number. Or if you're interested in comparing it to the IDEA disciplines. And you'll notice that the numbers don't change, but sometimes they do change depending on the numbers. And if there's no converted average comparison that's currently not available, because we generate the norms every year in September, depending on when the surveys close, it will show you this language. Converted average comparison not available, at least one relevant objective does not contain sufficient comparison data. And as soon as that data is available, it'll automatically generate the data in the converted average comparison. So again, if I change screens and I go, let's say here, and I'm keeping this here in terms of IDEA discipline, if I click on there, you'll notice that some of the learning objectives have the converted average scores and some of them don't, depending on the norm date, when the survey was closed, when the norm cycle every year in September was calculated. Any questions about converted averages?
Tara, of those numbers, those are not the same as a percentile score. Is that correct? So if I see 49, that doesn't mean that it would be
no
around the 50th percentile?
No, it doesn't mean percentile at all. Because t-scores don't work on a percentile. It's on the curve that where it falls in the t-score graph. So this happens to fall within the range of 45 to 55. So what I'm saying is when I click on this, if it says much higher, the highest 10%, this area does not represent 100%, is what I'm saying. And if you're interested, I can send you much more detailed explanation in the technical reports in terms of how it's basically, how you would convert an average score into a T-score. That's basically the conversion. So the formative tab we already looked at. Let's see if it's working now. Yes, that's what you would see when you click on the suggested action and it says idea note. It'll take you to this page, and faculty have access to this, of course, whether they're in the system or not. They just go to the IDEA website and they have access to this as well. It shows them how to apply the teaching method in the classroom, how to apply the teaching method online, and how to assess the teaching method. And then another thing here, you'll have the quantitative report is again the distribution for every single item, similar to what you saw in the summary report at the beginning when I showed you the summary report. This is for this particular course, whereas the summary report has the exact same numbers, but it has all the other courses next to it. So it's a, for the sake of comparison, if they do want to look at different courses that they're teaching next to the line items here. And the qualitative are all the comments for that particular course. And the segment comparison is whatever was put into the unit organization when the platform was developed. So in this case, I happen to have the business school. And if the faculty is interested in looking at the segment comparison within the business school, for every single item, the blue represents the faculty average and the purple represents the 8 courses that are in the that particular unit organization section and how many respondents. So here it says there were 39 respondents. So these are basically the 5 tabs on an individual faculty by faculty level. So the next section I'd like to show you, so this is individual faculty reports and also the summary reports for faculty. I'm going to jump over to this one, the response rates. And this is a really neat section where you can have control live as soon as the surveys are open and available to the students, where you can see what the response rates are. So you can set the thresholds to either, if you want to see if there's 100% response rates, 50% response rate, or active or closed sessions. And what it does is it gives you immediate data for every single course in your unit and what the response rate is at that particular time. This is helpful for department heads because if you know you only have like a 1-week window or a 2-week window where surveys are going to be collected, specifically if the faculty are teaching online courses, is you can look at the response rate and there's only 2 days left to go. You can always send a reminder to that particular faculty and say, your response rate is low. Would you mind sending a reminder to your students to complete the surveys? They actually have the same exact numbers in front of them for their particular course, so they can always track their own response rates too. For faculty who are teaching face-to-face classes, we obviously recommend, and we've spoken about this before when we did training with faculty in terms of in order to get really high response rates, we recommend that they do in-class capture and they use the link either in the syllabus, have the students take out their mobile phone in class, leave the room and say, you have 15 minutes, please do the survey. And they make announcements, and that has shown to improve response rates. So even if you see a faculty in your response rate section that is teaching a face-to-face class and is showing low response rates, then you can have a conversation in terms of recommending to that faculty to do in-class capture.
Tara, just a quick question about related to response rates, I guess. Is there a way for deans and chairs to see whether their faculty members have completed the objective selection so that the results are more meaningful?
Not at their level, but the on-campus coordinator can see it. So you would be able to have access to who has who has chosen the objectives and who hasn't. And that would be under the admin section. Immediately, the first thing you will see on the top right side is a box that says something like objective selection forms completed, faculty list, and then you click on there. I don't have access to it, otherwise I would show it to you. And you would have access to see who has completed it and who hasn't. And I think that's a great question, because really the instrument really only works if they use the instrument the way it was designed to work, which is target the learning objective, get feedback on the objectives that they've targeted, either as a faculty member or a group, as a committee, and get feedback on the targeted objective, and just randomly not choose objectives or not choose any objectives at all. Because if they don't choose any objective, the system defaults into important objective. All 13 are automatically chosen for them as important, and the data will not really be meaningful to the faculty. So the next section is a favorite of mine, question mean analysis. And I'm leaving this to the last because this is the one that has the most information, and I want to make sure we have leave lots of time for this one. The question mean analysis is basically a report for department heads, provosts, chairs, that gives an overall summary by question of all the results in the area for which you're responsible for. So if the department chair can only view the courses in their department, then that's the only questions that the results of those questions for that department. You don't see other people's departments. And the report is laid out by displaying the mean. You'll notice here the mean for each question on the evaluation. And let's see. And you can filter down by just clicking on these buttons here and looking at the subsections here. So you'll notice it begins with the 19 teaching methods. This happens to be the results of the unit that has been using diagnostic forms. So you will see the results for the mean for that particular teaching method. Every line item here is the mean, the standard deviation, and how many classes. And if you scroll down, you'll see the learning objective mean for every question for those 13 learning objectives for that particular unit, and how they're doing on those learning objectives for your unit. And then these are the specific questions that are custom questions that were added to it. So if you create custom questions, you will see the mean for those as well in the question mean analysis. Now, it also gives you the ability to drill down on these numbers. So if you're interested, let's say, I'll give you an example. If you're in your department or your program, you really want to make sure that in the coming terms, or just checking the previous terms, that your faculty were using a specific teaching method, or you were trying to get them to get a nice number on the learning objectives, that where the mean is quite high on the learning objective, this is where you would go. So I'll give you an example. So let's say forming teams or groups to facilitate learning. If that's particularly important to you for your department, and let's say you notice that this mean is really low, but that's really important to you, you could click on there, which is, it says the number of classes where this particular teaching method was observed and that were correlated to the learning objective. If you click on 9, it takes you to the details, and it gives you the specific faculty member, which class they taught, and the mean for that particular teaching method, that faculty member, the number of responses and the number of enrollments. So this is really useful if you're really interested in seeing which sections are doing well, so that you can model those behaviors. And if you see that a faculty member has high mean on a specific line item, then you can contact the faculty and say, we'd like to know what you're doing so that you have such great results, and maybe you can model that behavior in one of our professional development workshops and share with the rest of the faculty. And reversely, this is an area where you could see where there are areas of development for faculty who are not doing so well on particular learning objectives or teaching methods or custom questions. So this is a question by question mean analysis available to you when you click on the question mean analysis. Now the unit summary report really has a lot of data, so I'm going to go through one by one. And there are three main tabs, and again, you have access to the data depending on your role and access. So it has three tabs. I'm going to begin with the first tab, but before I begin with the three tabs, I'll just talk a little bit about what's included here and what's not, and the purpose of the design, the way it was designed. Each report tab, the way it's been designed, is really was created specifically to be a call to action. And it was intentionally designed to make sure that it provides the necessary information to support targeted professional development in your unit. So it does a sort of a unit analysis of relevant objective selections, so whether they were chosen as either important or essential, student learning, and understanding the unit's learning environment and contextual factors. So these are the three sections that you see here. What you should know is that the data you see in the unit summary report, or the USR we call it, only collects data from the diagnostic feedback and the learning essentials instrument. It does not contain any data from the teaching essentials instrument. So if you are a unit that only uses teaching essentials instrument, when you click on the USR, it'll just say generating data not available, because the data is not part of the USR. Also, you should know that the ratings in the USR only uses raw scores. It doesn't use the adjusted scores, because the adjusted scores are really just items that are part of the unique student characteristics, and those student characteristics, you have specific information under the third tab, which is the learning environment and context. And another thing you should know is that this USR does not have institutional comparison data. It only has comparisons between the IDEA database and that particular unit average, or whatever it is that you have, because the institutional average and the discipline norms are all available only on the faculty reports. So the teaching methods priority, I'm going to begin here, is a place where it's supposed to guide the department heads where they can focus their professional development efforts. And the information is organized around the relevant objectives, or the objectives that were chosen as either essential or important. And you'll notice what you'll see, the first thing is when you go into the teaching methods priority, it has high priority methods and style, moderate priority methods and styles, and low priority. And the explanation is actually quite useful here, because what this explanation here on what that I'm highlighting is, it basically, what it does is it looks at the data that's collected, and it says these teaching methods that you see here are correlated with student achievement of learning objectives that were selected by more than 2/3 of the course sections in your unit as either important or essential. However, these teaching methods were used infrequently in this group when compared to the IDEA database. And what the system does is it recommends that in your next professional development workshops or efforts for your unit, these are the teaching methods you should concentrate on. And that's basically what the teaching methods priorities does. Any questions around the teaching methods priorities tab? Okay. I'm going to go into optimization of relevant learning. So this tab is information that's designed to help you determine if the course emphasis and student progress on learning objectives are targeted and they're specific to learning outcomes for the unit. So let's begin with just the first thing that you see here is, you'll notice here it says the average number of objectives selected is important or essential in this unit. As you know, in order for the instruments to work the way they're supposed to work, we recommend that faculty choose between 3 to 5 learning objectives. So this number is important to you as a department head, because if you see the number 7 or 8, what this is telling you is that your unit's faculty are choosing more than 5 objectives. They're using on average 8 objectives, which they shouldn't be doing. So this is just a sort of a warning section. If you see it go above 5, that means you should remind your faculty to only choose between 3 to 5 objectives. Otherwise, the data is not meaningful to them when they choose more than 5 objectives as either essential or important. That's this number here. On the left, you'll see the relevant course objectives, which are the objectives that were selected as either essential or important. And what it does is it tells you the percentage of your unit that chose these objectives as either essential or important. So I'll give you an example. Again, using the team as an example, if this is the learning objective, your intention for your unit was to make sure that this objective, acquiring skills in working with others as a member of a team, if your goal was to have all your faculty choose this item as either essential or important for your unit, what this is telling you is only 57% of your unit chose this objective as either essential or important. So this is just a way for you to check to see whether the average of number of objectives that are being chosen by the unit are either overemphasized or underemphasized in your unit. And how does it align with your goals? And then you have here on the right the comparison to the IDEA database, the IDEA courses selecting this objective as relevant. So basically, again, if you want to know whether the learning objectives are appropriately emphasized and in alignment with your unit goals and mission, you would go into the optimization of relevant learning. Now, the second table below that section compares the ratings of progress on relevant objectives for your unit with the IDEA database. And the results of this section should help you figure out if special attention should be given to improving specific learning on one or more objectives. So this section is really of particular value to accrediting agencies and assessment programs if you're generating reports for them. Because it goes line by line next to the objectives, you'll notice it tells you how many sections this objective was chosen as either essential or important. It gives the unit average, and it gives you the IDEA average. So, if you're interested in comparing progress ratings across all the learning objectives, this is where you would go to see if there's a significant difference in how well those various objectives are achieved. And then how does your unit compare with the IDEA database? And then if I scroll down, you'll notice that it has a threshold section that's just sort of supposed to be, it was created to help faculty to see if the percentage of classes where the raw average was at least 3.5 and above 3.5, these are the objectives that were selected as either, that were chosen as relevant in that particular unit. And then you have the comparison percentage of IDEA next to it. So any questions on optimization of relevant learning? And actually, if you notice here, the language here, even before you click on the tab, it literally tells you what the tab is about. I'm going to click on the last tab, Learning Environment and Context. This tab gives you specific details related to the summative measures. So if you remember at the beginning when I showed you the faculty reports, there were 3 boxes in the faculty reports. There was the summative overall outcomes, progress on relevant objectives, excellent teacher, excellent course, and the summary evaluation. This is the data for your unit around those items that you saw in the individual faculty reports. So this table here, the first one, I'm going to go through each of these tables. This has a lot of information, so I'm just going to go one by one. So let's begin with this first table. This gives you a side-by-side comparison of the average converted scores for the unit with average converted scores in the IDEA database. So if you want to know in terms of making comparisons, obviously we recommend whenever you make comparisons, use the converted scores, and this is what it's doing. And if you want to have a quick overview of how your unit is doing in terms of excellent teacher, excellent course, and compare it to the IDEA database, these are the numbers to look at, the converted scores. So the next one is the same information, but put within the distribution table. So this table shows the distribution of the converted scores from much lower to much higher. And this standard chart shows the percentage of classes in each of the 5 performance categories. Again, the same questions, but shown differently in a distribution table. And if I come down here, you have the same information. If you remember at the top, it was the converted scores, and now you have the same information, but in the unit average. So this gives you a side-by-side comparison of the average raw scores for your unit and the average raw scores for IDEA. I'm going to come down here and talk a little bit about the student self-ratings and course characteristics. If you remember, we talked about adjusted scores and the questions that are asked the students that are beyond the faculty control. This section describes the student motivation, work habits, academic effort, all of which affect student learning. And this table gives the averages for this unit, for your unit and the IDEA database. So if you're interested in knowing the amount of coursework that was reported by the student and compare it to the IDEA average, this is where you would take a look. And here as well. So this one happens to be how much effort they put into the course, your unit, comparing it to the IDEA average. And then the same information is also represented in terms of percentages, where it shows the sections 4.0 or above, the percentage of those sections 4.0 or above for those specific questions about the student self-ratings and course characteristics. And then this percentage of sections that fall 3.0 or below. And here's the reminder again that all the information in the USR is from the diagnostic feedback and the learning essentials, and teaching essentials data is not part of the USR. So any questions about anything that I've shown you so far?
Tara, is there a way to see for a unit all the courses and faculty that were evaluated on the same instrument and kind of a list of the summative results?
Not here, but I'm going to move over after I finish here. I'm going to talk about the aggregate data files.
Okay.
The only way you would be able to see just a quick overview would be to click on the faculty report, see how many faculty were evaluated, and then click on the course reports individually and look at the summary reports that way. But in terms of overall viewing in a sort of a table, I can show, I'm going to move over and talk about aggregate data files, which is the next item on the list. So any questions about what you're seeing here before I change screens? Okay. So if you want to get something in a table that you can manipulate in terms of filtering by department, by objective, by program, by division, the one thing that I recommend, and again, department chairs can't do this, they have to go through you, Brian, or the on-campus coordinator. There's the one person who is identified as the person who has the ability to request and aggregate data file for security reasons, obviously, because it contains confidential information. We don't want any person randomly requesting these files. So that person has to be in our system, verified as somebody who can receive this file securely through an SFTP folder so that nobody can hack into it. And that person is the only person who's allowed to receive this aggregate data file. And this is a way where it has all the information that you see on Campus Lab, but the data is aggregated so that people who are interested in collecting the data and filtering can cut and paste the data and put it into separate reports. So for example, if I begin at the beginning here, I'm going to go back. The kind of things that you will see would obviously, you'd see the instructors, you'd see the course number, the department name, and this would give you the ability to filter. And let's say you only want to see the courses oops, it didn't take it, of only those who are doing civil engineering, then you'd have to filter it using the filter on the Excel spreadsheet. And then the other kind of information that you'll have is obviously you'll see the year, the batch number, the objectives, but also the means. So if I go back here, you'll be able to see the raw data for those particular courses within that particular department, the adjusted scores, the converted averages for each of the items. And this is one way that you can have an overview of everything in your department if you request an aggregate data file. So you have the OSF data here, which is the objective selection form data, the means. I'm just clicking on these tabs at the bottom, and the frequency and primary items, and so forth. So you have everything in a single spreadsheet. There's a couple of things you should know about the aggregate data file, that the data that you get that is different from the Campus Lab data that you see. Because the Campus Lab platform was designed specifically for faculty so that they can get meaningful data from there, we have adjusted the scores in the Campus Lab platform always to go up. However, when you get the aggregate data file, you'll notice that some of the adjusted scores might go down and some of them will go up. And the reason is, originally when we designed the adjusted scores, it was meant to go down and up. But for the sake of faculty who tended to misunderstand whenever the adjusted scores went down, and they thought that they were being punished for it, but it really wasn't the case, we decided to design the Campus Lab so that they always see their adjusted scores go up. So that's one difference. Also, if you have chosen to create custom questions using the attribute function of Campus Labs, that data is not part of the aggregate data file. And the third thing you should know about the aggregate data file is on the Campus Lab platform, there's a threshold of reporting, which is unless you have three students or 100% of students who are enrolled, the faculty will get no report. So for the sake of confidentiality, but the aggregate data file does collect the data on any courses regardless of the threshold.
Turn back in. Please leave it, Clark.
So any questions about the faculty reports, question mean analysis, aggregate data files? Brian, would you like to add anything before I stop the recording?
No, I think that covers everything. Thank you for taking the time, Tara, to walk us through that. I think it'll take us a little bit to play with it, and I'm sure we'll have some questions for you and the team at Campus Labs as we start to delve into the results.
Sure, and if you have any questions, then we can always schedule a question and answer session as well.